Okay, good morning. I do believe we are live. Can you hear me? We got Mars Capone in the chat. We got Big John UK in the chat. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Good morning. If you're catching this on the replay, thanks for joining me. Can you guys hear my voice okay? I'm going to assume that you can, unless someone says otherwise. And we're going to be hanging out. What's happening? We got a guy called Bunny in the chat. We got Rad Raf, a little bit far away to look at this monitor. All right, from here, we can hear you fine. Fantastic. All right, how about the sound of this? Are we exploding anyone's speakers? Hopefully not. What's up? We got Nino Beats in the chat. All right. What we're looking at here today is Patterning 3. It's an iOS drum machine. This is the third version of it, the new version of it. And the big thing to me about this new version is that we can finally use it as an AUV3 instrument, which means that we can load multiple instances of it inside of applications such as AUM. If I close down the drum machine here, we're looking at the AUM audio unit mixer, I believe is what AUM stands for, on the iPad. So I've got two instances of it here, and we can load as many as we want depending on, the power of your iPad. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to start from scratch with a brand new empty session, and I'm going to show you how you can load multiple instances of Patterning 3 and use them in its timeline mode to create like a full arranged track, or like a little bit of a moving and evolving piece of music to help you with your live jams, for example. Excuse me. Just get that right out of the way and have a sip of coffee. All right. So what we've got here is we've got a couple of the brand new drum machines that I've included in the new version of Patterning 3. One of my favorite things about Patterning from the beginning till now is the fact that it comes with a ton, and I mean a ton, did I say a ton, of drum kits that we can explore and download for free. You can even create your own drum kits and get those included in the app for other people to make music with. And how cool is that? Let me open this up a little bit bigger here. So if we open this up quite a bit bigger here. All right, fantastic. So if we go over to the Kits tab, okay, and we scroll down here to the bottom, there are currently 691, count them, 691 free drum kits that are available for Patterning 3. Once you get in, you get free access to all of these drum kits. And again, did I mention that you can make your own and you can have them included here for other people to make music with? All we have to do is press on Cloud Kits, and you can just start scrolling all of these drum kits that are included free in the app that are made by, people just like you and me. And the interesting thing about that is, everybody likes their own kind of music. Everyone's got their own style. People like a certain kind of sound, whereas someone else is going to like a different kind of sound. Maybe somebody owns a, specific piece of gear that they've sampled and made a drum kit out of in here. There are so many different kits in here and so much variety let's see here. There's a way to even go to artist and go to like search, for example, and you can type in something like, I don't know, Electronisounds, and you could hit return and you could find the free kits that I've made for patterning over the years. There's quite a few now. We've got the Future Step kit, the Bass Music Drums kit, the Chilled Percussive House kit, the Drum and Bass Rebellion kit. That's one of the kits we're going to be working with today. The F minor Saw Pluck Melodies kit that I've put together here for making melodic parts. That's one of the kits we're going to be working with today. A kit that I've made with sounds from the Electron Analog Rhythm, a Psytrance kit, another Future Step kit, and a kit that I made for the app on a live stream a couple of years back. These are all just kits that I've made personally for the app. And I've got those here in my drum kit browser. Again, you can just download as many kits as your heart desires until you've filled up your iPad with literally hundreds and hundreds of kits that are, you know, in sort of the style of music that you want to make. Or you can explore stuff that you would never, you know, make on your own. And that's just, I just absolutely love that about the app itself. But what we're going to be dealing with today specifically is the fact that it's an AUV3 now, and that means that we can load multiple versions of it so that we could literally have, you know, one version for like some drums, and we could have another version for some melodic elements. And then we could even have a third version for like some effect sounds. I'm going to try to keep this stream beginner friendly, so I'm going to try to go relatively slow today. We're not going to explore every nook and cranny that patterning has to offer. We're just going to be making some music with it in real time from scratch today. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask those questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to, you know, try to keep up with the chat and answer those questions. Before we get started, I'm just going to play what I've got going here one more time. And what I want you to listen for is how, without, you know, interacting with it, how it automatically changes between a couple of patterns, kind of goes back and forth, and then sort of, you know, repeats that loop again on its own. It's not just like a 1-bar loop, for example. This is like an 8-bar pattern, and then we have another 8-bar pattern, and then it circles around to that first 8-bar pattern, and we go into the second 8-bar pattern. Change up there. Circle back around to the beginning. All right, but what let's do is let's go ahead and start from absolute scratch today. I'm going to close AUM. We're going to give the iPad a little bit of a clean. Not seeing any comments in the chat. Let me know that you're still with me, guys. I'm getting a little bit of a low bitrate warning from YouTube. Just let me know that we're still live. That would be fantastic. We're going to start with an empty I'm going to assume that we are and hope that we are. Start with an empty session here. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to load an instance of patterning 3 as an audio track into AUM. Okay, we're going to open this up and we're going to load an audio unit extension. All right, thanks, John. Thanks. All right, I appreciate that, Bunny. All right, cool. So we're going to scroll down here and we're going to load patterning 3. All the way down. There we go, patterning 3. And we're going to go ahead and open that up. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger to start off with. We're going to start with a beat. But before I do anything, I actually want to create like a master bus, and I want to put a limiter on that master bus. Those of you who've seen my videos before where we do stuff live in real time know that I love to put a limiter on the master bus. We're going to protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers. That's how we do it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do an audio track, and we're going to make this a mix bus here, and we're going to have it receive from bus M, M for master channel. And over here, instead of sending this to the direct USB out, I'm actually going to send this to the mix bus M. So now this channel is going to this channel here. This is the channel on the right is our master channel. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Pretty straightforward stuff so far. I'm going to put an EQ on the master channel first. And let's see here. We're going to go audio unit extension. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to load my favorite EQ on here, which is the FabFilter Pro Q3. We're going to open that up. I actually have a setting that I saved from the last session that we just heard that I'm going to load here. And it's just a little tiny bit of a bump at about 350 hertz to make the snare punch a little harder, and just a tiny little, like 1 decibel boost on some of the very high frequencies at about 12,000 hertz. Not much of an adjustment here, but those little tiny tweaks add up to a well-polished track. So we're going to put that EQ on the master bus. That's just, for these particular instruments, I know it needs to be set that way, so we're going to just get that out of the way now. Next, I want to add another node on the master bus channel here. So if I double tap here, it creates a brand new node for me to load something into. And I'm going to load a limiter effect into that node here. So audio unit extension, and it's the Amazing Noises limiter. That's my favorite limiter that I like to work with. And again, what this basically is going to do is it's going to just sort of keep our sounds from going over the 0 decibel limit, and not allow any, if there's some rogue peaks or something goes wrong and it starts spitting out loud noises or something, it's going to help protect our ears, our headphones, and our speakers, and also help glue the mix together and get it as loud as possible as sort of like a finalizing device. I wrote down the settings that I used in my own session, and I'm just going to repeat those here, which is about 3 decibels of gain that we're going to drive into the limiter here. All right, at 2.9, that's good enough. And about 0.45 on the saturation. So we're going to be adding a little bit of gentle saturation to everything that goes through the master bus. And that's all we have to do. I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later when we get some volume going through there. But that's what we're going to do for now. Now, for those of you, again, who are familiar with my content, you know that I'm a chronic oversaver. So the very first thing we're going to do is save this as a file so that we can save it as we go along today. Would hate for any sort of crash to happen and then we lose what we've been working on, or say I make some weird mistake and it would be easier just to go back and load the last session. I'm a chronic oversaver, and I encourage you all to be chronic oversavers as well. You ever seen those posts where someone's like, it could be any instrument, it doesn't even matter, maybe the power snaps while you're working, or just obviously with an iPad that's not an issue, but if you get into the habit of saving all the time, you're just not going to lose your work. And I don't know about you, but I hate losing my work. So we're going to save this as a session. I think I might hit load or something. Here we go, save. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to give this a name. Cool. And let's just call this Patterning 3 YouTube. All right, cool deal. Done. Saved. So now I can save this session at any time, and we won't have to worry about, the possibility of losing stuff. I'm going to harp on this one more time. Be a chronic oversaver. All right, and so now that we're set up, we can start programming some beats and stuff. What we're going to do is we have a few different buttons over here for the main tabs of Patterning 3. And we've got the first tab, which is our actual interface tab, where we can see our pattern as a circular series of events. By default, it's a 16-step pattern, but we can create patterns that are much longer than that, like 128 steps. Make an 8-bar pattern if we want. It's really up to you. The next page is a sort of a finger drumming page where you can preview all the sounds you've got loaded in that kit. Okay, I don't do a lot of finger drumming, but that's in here. Pretty handy if you just want to quickly preview the sounds of a kit that you've downloaded without actually programming something. Next over, We've got the timeline page, which we're going to get into, where we can organize some patterns and how those patterns play back. Next over, we've got the mixer page, which is a full-fledged mixer. You can adjust individually all the volumes of your 8 instruments per kit. You can adjust the volume of the reverb. You've got panning per sound, all that kind of good stuff. And then the next tab over is the drum kit tab, where you can load a kit. You can even, we're not going to get super deep today, but you can even have a different drum kit per pattern. So you could have like the same instrument and then each pattern plays like a completely different drum kit, or you could have a different drum kit for a break or a turnaround if you wanted to. But what we're going to do is we're going to load the Drum and Bass Rebellion drum kit, which again you can download for free just by searching for Electronisounds in the Cloud Kits section. We're going to start with that kit today. We're going to go back over to the patterning tab. Bunny says, what limiter do I use for hardware end of chain? I don't actually have one that I use for hardware end of chain. What I do is I just make sure that all my levels are, as copacetic as I can get them, and then I do my recording usually in the 1010 blue box mixer recorder, and then I take that file, which will be a little bit low typically, and I'll load that 2-track master stereo file into Ableton, and I'll use like Ableton's compressor and Ableton's stock limiter to get that level a little bit more appropriate for YouTube, which for those of you who don't know is negative, not negative, but like 14 LUFS per se. It might be negative, I don't really know. I just know that I use a level meter to measure the LUFS count and try to get that as close to 14 LUFS in overall volume as I can, so that YouTube doesn't turn my content down once I upload the video. All right, but we're not going to, get sidetracked on a mastering quest here. I am going to start programming a beat. We're going to go ahead and set the tempo of our project to like 140 beats per minute. Whoops, 140 beats per minute. Get to the beats, Dean. And here I am on the kick drum. We've got a kick drum in this kit, a snare drum, a hi-hat, a shaker, a ride, a clap, a bass sound, a melodic bass sound, and a melodic synth sound. We're going to start with the kick, and I'm just going to program to start us off with like a really basic sort of drum and bass 2-step type of beat. Okay, so we've got the kick, and we'll put a snare in here, right? Really simple stuff. I hope you guys can hear that okay. Let me know if, as we get going today, if the levels are too quiet or too loud. If anyone's listening on decent speakers and we start distorting, please just let me know in the chat. All right, let's go ahead and get some hi-hats going here. So another thing I'd like to say right off the bat is that we can put in, if you see me putting in smaller, steps here, this is the volume of the steps. We can adjust just about anything we want, but if I put these up all the way, that's going to be, full velocity. If say I want to start over with the hats, I can go ahead and just choose this tool down here from a pencil tip to the eraser tip, boom, and I can get rid of any notes I've put in. But by default, when you're putting in the notes, where you put that is going to be the volume of that particular sound. So you can get some, variation on your volumes really easily as you're programming your sounds. All right, cool deal. You can see by default, it starts to give your projects a name in the actual instrument itself. It's got like an auto name feature. So right now it's labeled this as cool lichen covered branches, but that's not really what this is. So we're going to go ahead and just rename this. This is just going to be drums for now. Okay, cool deal. So project is drums. And remember I said about saving, it's really easy to save once we saved it that first time. If I go over here to the options, I can just hit save. It knows what I've called it, and I can hit save session, and it says overwrite, boom, and we've saved that session. Let's go ahead and like do a little bit more variation on this beat, what we can do is there's some tabs over here on the right hand side as well. So we've got some windows, like sort of tabs up here on the upper left, and these are basically for the for the whole kit, for the whole project. Again, there's the let's program this beat tab, then there's the drum pads tab, then there's the arrangement tab, which we'll get into, then there's the mix your sounds tab, and then there's the load your drum kits tab. But down here, these are tabs that really refer more to the actual drum kit itself, the individual sounds, okay? So we can start here in the patterns where we can duplicate a pattern or delete patterns that we don't want. We can also change what drum kit is playing per pattern. So again, I can't stress this enough. You could have 5 different drum kits playing on the exact same track if you wanted to. Next up, we've got the standard, like the playback mode. So you can have this play back in different modes. You can even have this wheel here auto rotate forwards or backwards. You can change the play mode to play the pattern, this particular pattern backwards if you wanted to. And these are individual per the sounds. It's not like the whole pattern. In that same, again, you can press these tabs over here twice to get different results. So patterning and drum kits. Next up, we've got the play mode, and if we click that again, we can adjust the swing and the quantization here. Next up on the third tab, we can load samples and change the attack, the hold, decay, and the tuning of these samples. We can decide whether they're playing back mono or poly, meaning whether the tail will keep going if you trigger another note, or whether it will choke itself in mono mode. Speaking of choking, you can choose a choke group as well, so that you can have a closed hi-hat sort of choke down the sound of an open hi-hat. If we click mix again, we can get into the filter section. So you've got a filter per sound, which can either be a low pass filter, a band pass filter, or a high pass filter. You've got a delay send per sound, global delay, and you've got a global reverb send per sound. We've got a pan on that tab as well. And lastly, we've got some ring mod if we want, and some distortion effects as well per sound of the 8 sounds per kit. In the next tab, we've got some MIDI settings, which we're not going to be getting into today. I'm not going to be incorporating any hardware, and I'm not going to be incorporating any MIDI controllers today. We're going to keep this iPad only and as straightforward and simple and beginner-friendly as I possibly can. In the last tab over here, we've got some individual settings that we can adjust per step, kind of like electron parameter locking type of stuff. We've got the coarse tune, we've got the fine tune, we can nudge the samples sort of off the beat a little bit. We've got the panning, the probability, we've got the ratchet count, so we can do those brr, brr, kind of like trap hat kind of effects, or brr, kind of rolls for snares and stuff. We can even affect the ratchet decay, like how long that's gonna, whether it's really tight ratchets or longer ratchets. And if we want to get even deeper and get into more individual settings per step, all we have to do is just press this plus button. And now we've got access to just about every single element that we can adjust inside here as well. So like the attack, the decay, the how much distortion you've got, you can adjust these things per step. So like say you want just one snare at the end of a pattern to be really distorted, all you would have to do is add, distortion over here to this list of layers. We've got LFO settings here, so you could change the filter type on the LFO. You could have my point is that you can change these per step, per instrument. So it starts to get a little mind-boggling as to how deep you could actually go if you wanted to. But Mars says, it looks super simple. It is actually, once you get used to it, because you don't necessarily need to get, super deep with all that stuff. And as you get more comfortable with it, you can get, as deep as you want to go. Kind of like the Electron gear, just the more you learn it, the deeper you can go if you want to. But what I want to do is I want to adjust the probability of some of these hi-hats so that they're not always going to play every single time that the pattern plays through. They're not just going to be 16th note hi-hats all the time. I'm going to give them a chance that they won't play. All right, so if I just like adjust some of these right now, they're all on 100% probability. So 100% of the time, these hats that I programmed are going to play. But per step, right, I can go and just adjust these randomly, right? Or if I don't like what I've done, I can choose the eraser tool and go back and make them all 100% probability again. So what I want to do basically, and when you start adjusting these, we'll see that it actually gives you a readout of what you're adjusting there at the top of the screen. So it's giving me a percentage. You know, I can go from like 47% chance that this hat will play every time it goes through the pattern. Basically, I'm just going to bring a few of these down, but not by a whole lot, so that most of the time they will play, but sometimes they won't play. And that's just going to get us the hi-hats to start moving a little bit. Let's just do something like that and take a listen to it. And what we're listening for is this sort of shaker sound that we're using as a hi-hat, that is going to start sounding a little bit varied now, because it's not just going to be straight up 16ths. It's going to have a little bit more of a life of its own. Here there's some rests in there now, basically. But where those rests are is going to be a little bit different every time it plays through the pattern. I'm going to make these a little bit higher numbers so they're more likely to play. More like 85s and 90% chance of it playing, stuff like that. Alright, I like that. And what we're going to do now is just a little bit more work on these sort of shaker hats as well. I'm going to click on Coarse Tune. And now what I can do is I can adjust the semitones of these samples randomly and maybe have some of them play, oh, I don't know, you know, like 1 or 2 semitones higher in pitch or 1 or 2 semitones lower in pitch. Just to get a little bit more variation and less static, you know, hat sound. This is just kind of a random thing that I'm doing. Doesn't have to have like a specific. Alright, just a little bit more movement in these hats now. We can do that same kind of thing with panning. And if you're listening on stereo speakers, we can adjust some of these hits in the stereo field a little bit as well. Just so there's a little bit more of that, you guessed it, movement in these sounds. So I'm going to pan some of these just gently, like 9% left or 9% right, just to get a little bit more movement happening here. Alright. Hey, what's happening, Tony? Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate you tuning in on your break, man. Big ups. Alright, I'm not going to try to spend too long on this pattern here, but what I'd like to do is I click back to the actual pattern screen here. What I can do is I can select the snare drum, and we can click this second tab here a couple times, right, until I get to the step. How many steps do I want that pattern to be? Each of these sounds, you can adjust the amount of steps in its rotation, you know, pattern to be a different length if you want. So for instance, I can make the snare 32 steps. So now the snare is a 2-bar pattern, right? And I can put a snare here and a snare there. And we can see the cursor going around the outside. And what that allows me to do is to make a variation in, like, say, the second measure of where the snare is playing. Maybe like here, and I can bring that a little lower in velocity. Cool. I can maybe even put another one in here. Cool. And now what we can do is we can go back to the Layers tab. If I'm going too fast, someone just let me know. Hey, what's happening, Russ? Thanks for tuning in. And I can go back to the probability. And I can lower the probability that those new ghost notes are going to play, so that they don't play every single time. And this, again, just helps the beat not be so tedious and help it be a little bit more alive sounding. The same way we did with the hi-hats, I can go into the panning. And I can maybe pan one of those ghost snares a little bit to the left, and I can pan one of those ghost snares a little bit to the right. Now, you're not really going to hear what I'm doing unless you're on an actual pair of headphones or a pair of stereo speakers at this point. We can even adjust the coarse tuning of those snares and make them different in pitch from our main snares. Ooh, yeah. All right, let's make that second one a little bit lower in pitch. Maybe just one lower. All right, so now we've got a little bit more variation happening there as well. I think I'm going to turn the probability on these down even more so they don't happen quite as often. That sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and go over to the clap now. So I select the clap on the left, and I kind of like to put a clap on every other snare sometimes. Cool, that sounds good. Let's move on now to something melodic. I have a bass sound in this kit. For those who missed the beginning and me loading this kit, this is a free kit that's included in Patterning 3 that I made. It's called the Drum and Bass Rebellion Kit, and you can download that for free. Let me go ahead and save what we've done so far. And let's see here. If we're on the bass, we can go to the pattern page and make this maybe 32 steps by default. And let's put in a melodic bass line, shall we? Trying to think of where I want to put it. That sounds alright. Maybe make it a little different for the second bar. A little lower in velocity. Yeah. Right on the snare. Yeah, cool. Maybe a little bit lower in velocity on that one. Maybe a little bit higher still. It's hard to mix on headphones sometimes. Now what we can do now is instead of having that bass play the same note every time, is I can go back to that layers page, you guessed it, and I can hit coarse tune. And now I can adjust the coarse tuning of that bass note, and we can make more of a bass line. Let's make this one, let's say, -2 semitones. Yeah, cool. And maybe make this one +1 semitone. And maybe make this one, I don't know, maybe +3. +3. That's a little bit more interesting. Alright. Is that sounding okay? Is that too loud for anyone out there? Are we not loud enough for anyone out there? Just let me know in the chat, because the OBS level meter is a liar. Alright. I think I'm going to put one more note in on that bass line. Yeah. Cool, let's just leave it there for now. Alright, what I want to do now is I want to load a second kit of patterning that we can use for melodic elements. And we're going to go ahead and insert a new track here. We're going to insert an audio unit extension. We're going to go down to Patterning 3, all the way down. There it is, Patterning 3. And I'm just going to move this track over next to our first track. We're going to route this through the master bus so that it's going through our main EQ and through that limiter. I'm going to hit the USB tab here to change it from sending to the main output to, to the mix bus. So now both of these tracks are feeding into our mix bus here. We can even label these tracks if we want to really quickly here. I'm a big proponent of labeling your stuff in your sessions. That way, say you come back to a project a month from now, even a year from now, that you can know exactly what's going on without having to do a whole bunch of extra work. We're doing the work now. I don't want to do the work later if I need to reload this. So I'm just going to call this first channel drums. We're going to call this second channel saw lead. Cool deal. And what we're going to do is we're going to open up that second instance of patterning 3. And we're going to go to the Kits tab from the upper left tabs section. And I'm going to load my F minor saw pluck melodies kit. Now this kit doesn't have any drum sounds. It just has what the name says, saw pluck, basically one shots that are in the key of F minor. So all of these 8 notes So you can download this kit and instantly make some melodies in the key of F minor really easily. If we go back over to our patterns tab, the notes are, over here on the left, the individual notes. So all we need to do is just start putting some notes in to get us started with. I'm going to just, I don't know. It's a little bit intimidating trying to do this stuff in real time on a stream because I really don't know, specifically what I'm programming. But I'm just going to start putting in some notes here. And we'll adjust as needed. And thank you for your patience. All right. Maybe this. I don't know. And maybe that. Let's hear what that sounds like. Great question from Peter in the chat. Yes, it can absolutely be used to play another AUV3 or hardware instrument. Instead of having the tracks here play the internal sample, you can go to MIDI and you can set what MIDI channel your track is playing out of and what MIDI note your track is playing out of. So you can set this up to play any external thing you want. We're not going to be getting into that today, but yes, you absolutely can. A lot of people use it that way as well, for sure. Cool. That sounds all right. What let's do now is I have set up an EQ that I used in the project that we started with, and let's just remove some of the low frequency content from this sound so that the bass and the kick drum have room to breathe in this mix. So underneath our saw lead, I'm going to load my favorite EQ again, which you guys know is FabFilter Pro Q3, and I'm just basically going to load a setting that I had in my previous project that's already set to remove those low frequencies. I'm also going to boost the high frequency content of this saw lead by about a decibel. So we're removing rather the low frequency content around 175 hertz, and we're boosting the high frequencies above about 5K by about a decibel, just to give a little bit more sparkle to this lead. And what I want to do is I want this lead to sort of have the same sort of life and movement and evolving attitude that our hats had. And what we're going to do is we're just going to, actually I think what I want to do is make sure that I've got like a note. Before we do that, I'd like to make sure that maybe we have a note playing on every step. Do I have one? I think I'm just going to put another one of these notes maybe on this step here. Cool. So I'm trying to make sure we have a note playing on all 16 steps. I'm not sure the 100% that we do. When I'm writing on my own, I take as much time as I need to, do this kind of stuff. But on these live streams, I, try to go relatively quickly so I'm not just boring everyone to death. You're welcome, Peter. Um, so what we're going to do, though, is we're going to go back into the Layers tab on the far right here. You can also adjust the LFO settings here, which we're not going to get into today. But you've got two LFOs. They can be, sine wave or triangle wave, square wave, or whatever. And you could have your sounds evolving that way. Like maybe you want the filter to be gently, moving up and down, the filter cutoff knob or something, or maybe you want the pitch of a sound to be gently moving up, and etc., etc. So you can really get deep here if you want to, but we're going to try to keep it a little bit more simple today. And I'm going to just go to the probability tab, and I'm going to just take the probability on some of these notes and bring it down from 100% probability to more like 80, maybe 90% probability. As I click the different notes here, I can change that probability individually on these notes. Maybe make that like 85. Maybe make that one like 90. And what this is going to do is this is just going to help the pattern sound a little bit more evolving. Maybe you don't want that, maybe you want your pattern to be exactly the same every time it plays through the sequence, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But this is just a way that with a 1-bar loop, we can keep it just sort of moving a little bit and help the listener retain interest in the sound, because it's kind of constantly moving just a little bit. So we've done just a really tiny amount of probability to some of these notes. Not all of the notes, just some of the notes. Yeah, so every time it plays through this 1-bar pattern, it'll be just a tiny little bit different. Hey, what's happening, Psych Rock? Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you being here. Alright, let's go ahead and save at this time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create some variations of these patterns and start creating something of a timeline that the AUM can play back automatically. And again, so you can use this method here to create, full produced arranged tracks from start to finish, or you can kind of use this to help with your live jams. I know I love to do live jams, and if you create like maybe 2 or 3 patterns that blend back and forth into each other, maybe you can play a live synthesizer over that, or it gives your hands free to maybe adjust some knobs, or maybe you've got AUM controlling a MIDI clock on an external piece of gear like a Digitact or any other groove box, and it gives your hands free to do something else. Maybe you're playing an external synthesizer along with the jam. So if you've got some different patterns that the patterning can play back and forth between, it's going to be, and again, you could do this as many patterns as you wanted to create an entire song using this method as well. So we labeled our first instance of AUM as the drums. It's got that auto name process. So rather than call our synth lead Lavender Potatoes, which may sound delicious, we're going to go ahead and call this Saw Pluck Lead. That way it makes it a lot easier for me to know, when I've got both of these open at the same time, that this is our drums and this is our Saw Pluck Lead, in fact. What let's do is we're going to go over to the first tab over here on the left, where we can choose either between our patterns or the drum kit. Don't forget, we can change the drum kit per pattern. So what I want to do is I just want to create another pattern. So up here in the very upper right, we've got a plus, and then we've got a duplicate. So if I wanted to duplicate the pattern that we've just created with our Saw Pluck Lead, I would press the duplicate icon. If I want to add a brand new pattern, I'm just going to press the pluck, and that's going to create an empty pattern, and there we've got a B pattern. And you can label these as well. So instead of having it say A, we can just tap on that, and I can call this, main pluck 1, for example. Cool. And then I can take this B pattern here and I can call this chords variation. And you may be saying, chords, what are you even talking about? Well, what let's do is let's create some chords. I'm going to hit the F note here, and I'm also going to hit the G sharp at the same time that that's playing, and we're going to hit the C, all playing at the same time here on this pattern. So now we're using the F minor saw pluck melodics kit to create chords. And what let's do is let's make another, yeah. And maybe I don't want this A sharp to play on that chord every single time. Maybe I want it to only play sometimes. So if I go over to the Layers tab and we highlight probability, I can maybe bring that down to 50%. And now it doesn't play every single time. Maybe we want some of these higher notes. Yeah. So now we've got a different sort of pattern with the melodics that are now playing some chord hits and some melodics. Maybe we don't want those little ghost notes at the end of the pattern to play every single time. So if I go back into probability and maybe set those to about 70%. Now it's sort of evolving a little bit more. Each time it plays through that one bar pattern, it's a little bit different. Yo, point two, thanks for tuning in, Gaz. I appreciate you being here. What is it, like 3 in the morning your time? We're going to go ahead and save. Don't forget to save your work. Once you've created, a pattern, maybe another pattern, or tweaked a pattern, just save. Just, it's not that it's crashing, but just you never know. What if I accidentally, screw up and do something that sounds terrible, and maybe I just want to go back a step, to a previous state where it sounded good. Just any number of reasons why you should just get into the habit of always being a chronic oversaver. All right, so now we've got 2 different melodic parts and one, real simple drum loop. Normally, I would take a little bit more time and maybe make a 4-bar drum pattern with some more variations in it, or a 2-bar melodic lead with some more melodic variations in it. But we've already been going for an hour and 15 minutes, and I've got some more things to show you still. So I'm just trying to kind of show you these elements. You don't have to make music that sounds like this. Obviously, you can make, whatever kind of music you're into. You can load whatever kind of samples into patterning you like. But what I really want to get across here is how you can use it to create these evolving, either full tracks or something maybe you could base a live jam on. So what we want to do is we're going to open up the first instance of patterning now. This is our drums, which is easy to see because I've labeled it drums, right? And we're going to go to the 3rd tab in the upper left, which is our timeline tab. And let me just label our pattern before I do that. See, it still says pattern A here. So if I click up here, I can rename this. See, let's just call this main beat 1 for now. Okay, done. Cool. So if we go to the 3rd tab, this is the timeline mode, and I can start adding patterns into this timeline, this arrangement. Okay, so I can add this main beat in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and let's add that in for right now. Let's add that in 8 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for a total of 16. We've got a loop brace up here, so I can drag that to wherever I want the loop to be, and then I can put us on loop mode, and that you see highlights the activates rather that loop brace. So it's going to play for 16 bars and then it's going to loop back around. If these were patterns that were longer than 1 bar, actually it is longer than 1 bar. I'm glad I realized this because I did adjust that snare pattern to be, I wonder if I can highlight multiple. Yes, I can highlight multiple by just clicking and dragging, so that was cool. Saved us some time. I actually want this to play for 2 bars because that snare part we programmed has like the ghost notes in the second measure. So now I just want to go ahead and duplicate that 8 times. To 16. Okay, our main beat 1. And now if we just push that out of the way and open up our second patterning, which is our saw pluck lead. Let me know if I'm going too fast. What's happening, James? Thanks for tuning in. If anyone has questions, just feel free to drop those in the chat. Feel free to let me know I'm going too fast or maybe I'm going too slow. Let me know that as well. We're going to go ahead and work the timeline now for this pluck. I'm just going to get out of the layers mode so that I can, verify that I've got my 2 patterns here. We've got the main pluck and we've got the chords variation on that. And both of those are just 1-bar patterns. So if we go to the 3rd tab on the upper left to get us into that timeline mode, I can put the main pluck in. See, like 8 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now there's a main pluck 18 times. And we can put the chord variation, did I say 18? I meant 8. So we can put the chord variation in 8 times as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so now it says, we've got 16 bars. I can go ahead and, where is that? There we go. Make that a little bit smaller. I can grab that loop brace and I can drag that out so the loop brace is highlighting all 16 bars, and then I can click the loop icon and highlight and activate that loop brace. Now it's going to play whatever I've got put in the timeline here, and then it's when it gets to the end, I don't think I have that right at the end. When it gets to the end, it's just going to loop around to the beginning. So what have we done by doing that essentially? We've got our main pluck 1 playing for 8 bars, and now we have our chords variation playing for 8 bars. And every 8 bars, it's going to switch back and forth between these 2, melodic patterns. Let's listen to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? I'm not hearing it start at the beginning. What we need to do is one more step. Up here, next to the tempo and the metronome, we actually need to click the timeline icon, which matches that timeline icon on the left. And when we do that, it actually says timeline enabled. And now you can see when I did that, the whole thing lit up at the bottom. And now it knows to play that in AUM instead of just playing timeline enabled, instead of just playing the individual patterns. So now when I press play, it'll start with our main pluck 1, play that for 8 bars, and then play our chords variation for 8 bars. Yeah. What's happening? All right. We're going to change 1, 2, 3, and back in 1, 2, 3. Here we go. Right? So that change one more time. In 1, 2, 3, and right. So does that make sense to everyone? We create multiple patterns. We go into timeline mode. We put those patterns wherever we want them to be. Then we enable timeline mode in patterning 3, and then we're good to go. Let me know if I did that too quickly. That was possible with patterning 2, James, because what I'm doing actually to create the melodies is I've created a kit that you can download for free inside of patterning. If we go over here, it's the F minor saw pluck melodies kit that I put together. And all this kit is it is 8 melodic one-shots that I've tuned to the key of F minor. So there's no drums in this kit. It's just these one-shot, really plain, basic synth pluck sounds. So it's really easy to add melodics in the key of F minor with this kit here. So I've got a bass sound in the drum kit. Let me see if I can just really quickly mute the saw lead. Here we're hearing just the drum kit, but the drum kit has a bass sound that I've put in. This is the Drum and Bass Rebellion kit, which you can also download for free from the 691. Now, 691 included free cloud kits when you get patterning. You could download this kit and program a bass line and a beat with the same kit. Cool. What let's do is let's go ahead and save what we have so far, and then let me create a variation of this beat. So not only are we going to go back and forth between a variation on the melodic elements, but we'll also go back and forth between a variation of the drums. I'm going to disable timeline mode with this icon over here next to the tempo and stuff, to where it says timeline disabled. We're going to go back over to the pattern mode here, and what I'm going to do is I'm trying to decide if I want to duplicate our original beat or maybe make something else from scratch. I think we'll just make a second beat from scratch. So to add another pattern, I'm going to press the plus icon here where it shows either sort of duplicate a pattern or add a new pattern. And now we have main beat 1 and we have a B beat. So if I just start programming something in here, let's see. Maybe something really simple and straightforward. Whoops, I'm going to put that there and put this here and put this here. You sort of get used to writing this way. Right, a really simple beat so far. Let's add some hats. Again, the different amount that I bring the slider up is the volume there, so you can really easily create some interesting hats that don't have just the same machine gun vibe the whole time. Maybe what I want to do is maybe I want to add the ride cymbal, right? And maybe we want to add the clap on both snares. There, just that simple. Now we have a different beat, but it doesn't have a bass line yet. So let me click over to the bass tab. Maybe I'll put this one over. Okay, and now that we've got that bass one shot in, it's just pretty static. It's not really much of a bass line as I would want it to be. So we want to change the individual notes that it's playing on the individual steps. We're going to go over to the Layers tab, and you guessed it, we're going to click Course Tune. We're going to maybe detune this step. Maybe add, see if we can go up 5. Why is that not doing what I want? Ooh, I like that. Cool. Maybe bring this one down. Alright, so now we've got more of a bass line. We adjusted the individual steps, course tuning on that note, right? What's happening, Daniel? Tap and expect us. All right. So now what we've got is we've got a sort of main drum part, and we've got this variation. Again, that's a variation on the drums and the bass. Let's just call this variation 1 for let's just call this variation. Oh, come on. Variation 1 for now. Fantastic. And now what we can do is we can go over to the timeline mode, and instead of having the main beat play for all 16, we can delete that. I could have just highlighted all of those, I suppose. This is a 2-bar pattern, so now I can just put the variation in. Now I want to tell it that the variation should be 2 bars as well. There we go. And duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. Now we've got it going out for the full 16. And if I put this back into timeline enabled mode, it's going to play our main beat for 8 bars. And then when the melodic pattern changes to its variation, the drums will change, the bass line will change, and the beat will change as well. So I just need to make sure that I've got both of these in timeline enabled mode, which we do now. And here we go. Unmute the melodic part from the mixer here. So we'll get the variation happening in 2, 3, and Alright, what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a little bit of a fill at the end of these full 16 bars before the pattern loops back around again. So I'm going to take the drums off of timeline mode so that I can work just on the pattern here. And what we're going to do is we're going to click the pattern tab in the upper right here to get me into these individual patterns. I'm going to highlight variation 1, and I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to go ahead and just press the duplicate button instead of pressing the add new pattern button. So now I have a variation 1 pattern, you know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to label this variation with fill. And now we're going to create a fill at the end of this pattern. Again, we're not in timeline mode, so I can just work on the pattern without fear of it changing to the other, different patterns that I've got here. I can click snare, for example. I can put some more snare notes. Cool. Maybe I want to change the pitch of those snares to make that snare roll a little more interesting. We can go to course tune. Ooh, yeah. Cool. And maybe we want an extra kick to happen at the end of that fill as well. So we go over to pattern, and here's our kick part. I've highlighted the kick sound. So here's our basic kick. It's just a 16-step pattern. But I want something interesting to happen at the end of this fill, to match what the snare is doing. So I'm going to make it a 32-step pattern instead of a 16-step pattern. And I'm just going to extend out what the kick has been doing. Got a little bit more action happening at the end there. Maybe we'll do the same thing with the clap. We'll maybe give it a little bit more interest as well. Currently the clap, when I click the clap sound, is only just a 16-step pattern. But if I make that a 32-step pattern as well, and I put those other claps in there, maybe we can, I don't know, just add a few more clap sounds so that on the second bar, it plays a little bit more of an interesting part. Cool. Cool. All right, fantastic. That's our variation with fill now. So if I go back to the timeline mode, the timeline mode, again, I hope I'm not going too fast, just let me know. I have not used Drambo, James. I spent my time investing in MyRack before Drambo was released. And the thing that drew me to MyRack is the fact that when you learn MyRack, you're not just learning an app on the iPad. You're learning actual, real-world Eurorack. And that helped me, whether for the good or for the bad, that helped me enter the giant, unstoppable rabbit hole of real-world Eurorack. As you can see behind me, I've got a huge system over here and tons of videos on this channel that feature real-world Eurorack, which sort of it can be a stepping stone to that, whereas Drambo is, I know it's great and a lot of people love it and it can do a lot of magic things, but I didn't want to take the time investment to Drambo just to learn yet another app on the iPad. There's only so many hours in the day, so I chose to go down the MyRack route instead. So in the timeline mode here, we're going to delete the last 2-bar pattern of the drums, which was that variation 1. And now instead of variation 1, we can add variation with fill. And now, so at the end of our 16 bars, it's going to actually do that turnaround before it snaps back to the beginning of the pattern. If I enable timeline mode, and we play the pattern through, when it gets here, it's going to play that fill before it snaps back around again. So we're going to change it up in 1, 2, 3, change. Different beat here, adding the ride. A little bit of a fill there at the end. Now, something we can do, I'm going to go ahead and save at this time, something we can do to accent these sort of changes when our patterns change and the parts are evolving is we can add some effects into this. This is one of the neat things about patterning being an AUV3 now, is I can add another instance of patterning, right? We can go audio unit extension, and I can scroll down and add another patterning. Okay, I can move this one over so we're, sort of in line with the other sounds, and then we're going to route this to our master channel, which is going through that limiter. So I'm going to press USB. So instead of going to the main USB out, which is whatever audio interface you've got connected. Today I'm using the Digitact 2, but that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter what audio interface you are using. You just, for the most part, need to have any audio interface connected to your iPad if you want that solid, pro sound. And I'm going to route this channel here to mix bus M for master bus. That's that simple. And now we've got another instance of patterning here, and I can do whatever I want here. I can load vocal samples if I wanted to, or scratching samples and make a hip hop beat, or whatever we can come up with. Chord stabs and make a dub techno vibe. But what let's do is on the first sample here, let's go ahead and we're on the, by default, it just puts you at the sample loading tab. Let's load like a crash, some crash and impact sounds and effects sounds into this one here. Instead of letting it call it its default, project name, I'm going to call this Effects. Whoops, maybe if I spell it right, that'd be good. Effects. Cool. And then I'm just going to tap to open a sample. Here it opens up the samples folder that you've imported your samples into Patterning 3, but you can also scroll, elsewhere on your iPad. I've just imported some samples here to keep it nice and straightforward and clean and tidy and easy to use. So I've got a folder of effects sounds, and what we're going to do is we're going to load Dean's Go To Crash. Tap to open. We're going to load that on the first sample channel. On the second one, I'm going to select where it says snare, and I'm going to tap to open, and I'm going to choose an effects noise burst crash. I'm going to tap to open. And let's just keep those for now. Here's what they sound like. It's a crash cymbal. and the noise effect, a crash. What I want to do is I want to go back to the pattern mode, and I want to be on that noise crash there, and I want to put that on the downbeat. Now if I go back to, whoops, if I go back to the second tab on the upper right, I can adjust how many steps are in this pattern. Well, I'm just going to go all the way here and make this an 8-bar pattern. I'm going to go all the way up to 128 steps. 128 steps. And now what you can see is you can see 2 bars of the pattern at one time, but there's this new little icon down here. It says 1 out of 4. This is the page you're looking at. So here's, I can click that open. Yes, we get it. Oh, stop it. We can go, page 2 of 4 by using the little arrows. We can go to page 3 of 4, and it says by the little tab number up here which page number you're into. So it shows you 2 bars at a time. You can have patterns that go on as long as you want, pretty much. But I think 128 steps, so 8 bars is, makes a lot of sense for something like this. Now, if I go into timeline mode here, and I can we've got pattern A inserted. I want this to be 8 bars because I've just created it to be 8 bars, 7 and 8. Now, if I enable the timeline by clicking the little loop brace there, and I click this over here, up here to timeline enabled mode. Now, just like the other instances of patterning, it's now playing this timeline. So every 8 bars, it's just going to cycle that pattern. And every 8 bars, it's going to put that impact crash on the downbeat. I hope that makes sense. Maybe we'll make that a little bit lower in volume. Track volume. And maybe we'll even... Yeah, I'm going to leave it a little bit panned to the left. That's cool. Maybe take off some of that reverb send. What's happening, Wall? Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I really did go all in on my rack. Once I, learned how it all worked, I really wanted to get my hands on some of the physical hardware, and that is a slippery slope. I'll be the first to, tell you and admit that it is a slippery slope. And the next thing you know, your credit card's exploding and PayPal credit is your best friend. And all right, we're going to move on. What I want to do, though, is instead of having that, this is all about variation and all about movement and how we can construct not only just an entire arranged track, but how we could use this to create like elements for a live jam. For example, if we made 3 drum patterns and left the lead at 2 patterns, then we're going to start changing everything was still changing every 8 bars. Then the leads are going to start playing over different beats, if that makes any sense. Or if I made, 5 melodic variations, but just only these 2 drum beat variations, we're going to get out of sync with what I originally programmed, and things are going to start sounding different. And those elements, sort of like polyrhythmic, but with whole stanzas instead of just measures. I probably said that very badly. I hope that makes any sense at all. What I want to do is let's go ahead and label this track effects before we go any further. Let's X that out. This is effects. Cool. And then let's make a second pattern here. So if I click on the pattern tab and I click on duplicate, now we've got an A and an A1. If I call this pattern the noise crash, and I call pattern A1, if I call this the regular crash, because remember I loaded up 2 different sounds here. If I'm on the regular crash, I can delete this noise crash and I can just put in the regular crash instead. I can go over here, here on the second tab, and I can adjust that pattern to be 128 steps as well. So now what we've got is we've got 2 variations of that sort of impact crash sound. One time it's going to play the noise impact, which again, like so, and then the other time it'll play the crash cymbal like so. and I can just make sure that that crash cymbal, if I'm going into the mix tab, yeah, we're not going too much into the reverb sends. I can maybe put a high pass filter on that crash cymbal and maybe just remove any of those low frequencies hanging out with the crash cymbal. Cool. I maybe want to bring that up in volume just a touch. Maybe not quite that much. Cool. And so now if we go over to the timeline page of the effects, now this is the third instance of patterning we've got. I've got the noise crash, and if I go to this, if I click on the main section here, we can see our patterns, so I can put the regular crash in, and I can extend that out to be, whoops, come on, 16. I made that one too long still. Come on. There we go. And I think I've made the loop brace a little off. Yep, I did. Whoop. There we go. So now we've got the noise crash every first 8 bars, and then it'll play the regular crash on bar 9. So we've got a little bit of variation happening as our patterns change as well here. If I make sure that we're in timeline enabled mode, it highlights that. And now if I start from the beginning, comes the regular crash. So a little bit more variation happening, right? Here's the fill. We go back to that beginning. Okay, what let's do is let's go ahead and save what we've created so far, and let's create one more variationing for the melodic part. If I bring that version of patterning up, right, we've got our main pluck 1, we've got our chords variation. If I go over here to the upper right and press the plus, we've got a B pattern coming up, and I can call this chords 2. And what let's do is let's go ahead and make this one a little bit more sparse than the other chords variation. If I disable the timeline, now we can just work on this pattern alone without worrying about it changing up on us. So we've got this sort of call and response now. But say this response is a little bit too static for me. So if we click on the Layers tab and click on the Coarse Tuning, now we can adjust those notes. Hope that makes sense. We can even adjust the panning on those sounds so that that sort of response goes across the stereo field from left to right. Can't hear that unless you're on headphones or proper speakers or whatever, but just a little bit of something, something extra that we can do. So now we've got yet one more melodic part. We could take our time and have made this a 2-bar pattern or a 4-bar pattern, something a little bit more interesting. That's typically what I would do when I'm writing on my own. But again, it's been about an hour and 45 minutes, so I just kind of want to go quickly on these live streams so that I can show you guys what I'm talking about here. So on there now, if we go back into our timeline mode on the saw pluck lead, okay, again, this is why it's so important to label these different versions of patterning as we add the different versions, so you can make sure you're on the right one as we continue adding more sounds and whatnot. What we want to do is we want to add our chords too, and these are just one bar. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I've got a 24. Whoops. Now I'm trying to move that loop brace there. Now I've got a 24 bar pattern that's happening with the melodics, but the crashes and the drums are still set to 2 bars. This is what I meant, not 2 bars, but 16 bars. So we've got a 24 bars happening 3 different patterns with the melodics, and 16 bars, 2 different patterns happening with the drums. So if I bring this back to timeline enabled and we play the whole thing together. That my loop brace is all wrong here, so I'm going to fix that. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there we go. And we've got those accent crashes happening every 8 bars as the pattern changes. Thanks, Peter. Change it up. All right, let's go ahead and save what we've got here. I see there's a great conversation happening in the chat about reverb, and Wall is hooking you guys up with some good answers, because Eventide Black Hole is absolutely an amazing reverb, and FabFilter Pro R is not only a fantastic reverb on the iPad, but it's actually my go-to reverb on the desktop as well. FabFilter Pro R. That's what I reach for in Ableton all the time. Really good stuff. Basically anything from FabFilter is really awesome stuff. I really like FabFilter Saturn for using on the desktop as well, for adding some gentle saturation to things. Fantastic stuff. Let's go ahead and add one more variation on the melodies, because I want to just show you guys just how easy it is once you get started to create these different variations. Again, I'm just doing simple patterns here, like just 1 bar patterns for today. So we take timeline mode off, we go back to the main pattern section, we click pattern over here so we can see the 3 patterns we have already, and I'm just going to click, you can make this bigger if we want to, I'm just going to click the plus button. Okay, so we can have a brand new pattern as well. And let's label this. We're going to call this, variation 2 or something like that. So now we've got main pluck 1, chords variation, chords 2, and now variation 2. What let's do is let's try to make this different than I've done the others by starting with some of the higher notes this time instead of starting with some of the lower notes. And I'm going to just randomly pick some I'm just literally grabbing, these are all notes that are in the key of F minor, and I'm just randomly putting some of these notes in here. Let's hear what that sounds like. That's all right. Let's make this one so that there's a chord hit on the last 2 beats. Dun 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 chord. What I'm going to do, dun 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 chord. So let's grab like our root note here and put it there. Let's grab maybe an A sharp and put it here. Maybe that other F and put it there. So now it's going to go dun 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 boom boom. Just a Another variation, right? Okay, just that quick. Now we go back into timeline mode, the third tab over here, right? And all we need to do, maybe squeeze that so we can see a little bit better, and we add this variation to 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If it was a longer pattern, I wouldn't have to put it in 8 times. You know, if we took the time to make it, you know, more interesting, maybe make it a longer pattern, for example. But now we've got 32 bars of melodic patterns, 4 different change-ups that are happening here. And it's just that simple. If I go back into timeline enabled mode and start from the beginning. Whoops. What did I do wrong there? Let's see if we can hear it once it changes the pattern. Or nope. So we've lost our lead for some reason. I'm not sure what I've done wrong there. But this is definitely something that would be good for reloading, I would say. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's just go to Files, because I could try to figure out maybe exactly what it is, but it might be easier just to reload, because the last time I saved it was in a working state, right? Let's hope this is an interesting test on a live stream. Let's hope it's working. It's not working. I think I loaded the wrong I loaded the wrong file, and that's why. I think I loaded my original pattern rather than the Patterning 3 YouTube version. There we go. Yeah, I've seen, I don't know how to say it, rim de guerre. I'm pronouncing that horribly wrong, I'm sure, but I've heard some good things about it. It's supposed to be really interesting and fun to play with for like creative effects as well. Yeah, here we go. Now it's loading all of these. So hopefully we'll get our melodics back. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. Yeah, we did get our melodics back. Let's see how much we lost. If I go into the patterning, we lost that last variation. Let's see how fast we can recreate it. If I just add the plus, and we've got this here, we can go variation 2. See, this is why I like to be a chronic oversaver, because I'm really glad this happened, because I just want to, because so many people I see posting all the time about, oh, I lost something, I turned it off, or the power snapped, or not with the iPad, but say you're working on the Digitact and you had a power outage, then you turn it back on again and your whole session is gone because you never saved. Like, oh my God, that sort of stuff is the worst. And so I'm never going to stop saying on these streams, be a chronic oversaver. Let's do what we just did. Let's do it really fast. Let's put some of these notes in randomly with some different velocities here. And let's put the root, and then this, maybe this C here, and maybe this D sharp here. Okay, cool. Let's hear that. Fantastic. That'll work. Since it's still playing, let's go ahead and save at this point. Overwrite, saved, cool deal. We're going to jump back into that timeline. Whoops, I'm hitting all the wrong tabs here. We're going to jump back into that timeline mode real fast, and we're going to add that variation 2 8 times to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. See, it didn't even really take that long to recover from that little bit of a weird anomaly there. All right, fantastic. Now, if we just make sure that our timeline mode is enabled, now we've got a fourth melodic pattern that this will play through before it goes back to that first pattern. Yeah, obsessive saving for the win. James knows what I'm talking about. now every 8 bars. I'm going to go back to the beginning. In 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't think our drums are changing anymore. So if I bring those up and I make sure that timeline mode is enabled on those drums, we should be hearing that turnaround on those as well. But before we, just make sure that that's working, why don't we make a variation on these drums? Why don't I just go ahead and save real fast? And let's make more of a breakdown, like a real break, a real pause kind of a pattern, to where, like this will now be 24 bars when we're done, and the melodics will still be 32 bars. So these patterns will start playing against each other in a more interesting way. If I go back to pattern mode here, and I look, we've got a main beat, a variation, and that variation with a fill. I'm just going to add a brand new part here, and now we've got a B, and I'm going to call this one, actually should have left the B there, I'm going to call this break down. Okay, and what we're going to do is keep it really simple, and maybe just do like with the kick, that's the clap, whoops. What I want to do maybe is make this a 32-step pattern. So we've got a little bit more variation happening there. 32-step pattern. Doom, 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 doom. And then put one on the last here. Doom, 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 doom. This one here. Cool. Now, I just want to do a little bit with maybe some shakers still happening. Just some random velocity shakers here on the 16ths. Yeah. Now we just need the bass to do a little bit of a something. So let's put that bass on a couple of these downbeats, maybe a couple more notes in here. Maybe it will mimic what the kick is doing. You can hear in the background those other parts are in timeline and still changing. Let's change the pitch on this last one here. Coarse tuning. All right, so now we've got a really simple, just 2-bar breakdown drum pattern. We go back into the timeline mode, and I can put this in at the end here. We need to make that 2 bars, so I'll just slide that over. We'll duplicate that 1, 2, 3 times. So now our drums, you can see once you've started, with your patterns, and once you've got your sounds, relatively well mixed or whatever, you can just start creating a ton of variations really quickly, and this will start becoming an alive and moving, and fully arranged piece of music. And all we're doing is just using the samples, just using one-shots in patterning 3. We're not using any external instruments. Of course, you could. And so the options and the opportunities start becoming really amazing if you think about it, if you don't want to just limit yourself. But I really love writing with samples. So for me, this is like home, We're going to make sure that the timeline is enabled on all 3 instruments that we've got here. We've got the effects, we've got the drums, and we've got the melodic. Now I've got the timeline enabled on all 3 instruments, and now we can just start playing it again. Say it again. Our drums, we've got 3 variations for a total of 24 bars. Our melodics, we've got 4 variations for a total of 32 bars. So the drums are going to snap back around before the melodics reset now. You know what I'm saying? And let's save. That breakdown we just programmed. right, what we could do is I don't want to go on too much longer because we've been going for 2 hours, and I know I have a tendency to kind of go really extremely long on some of these live streams. It's like 4 hours, Dean. What are you doing? But let's do one more thing at least before we call it for today. And let's make that a variation of our breakdown part. So we've got a really big build-up happening, a lot more than just a little snare fill at the end, but more of a really big, build back into it. I'm going to go off of the timeline mode on the drums. So timeline disabled on the drums. We're going to go back to our pattern window so we can see all of our 4 patterns. I'm going to duplicate this breakdown pattern. Duplicate. So we got breakdown 1, but I'm not going to call it that. I'm going to call it breakdown build up. Okay, so that I know it's the one that has a big build up. And what I'm going to do is these are 2-bar patterns. I'm going to go back into this snare part here, and I'm just going to kind of do this sort of a deal. I'm putting it into where it just sort of builds up in velocity here for the whole bar, right? And maybe let's bring the clap, and let's make this a 2-bar pattern as well for the clap. 32 steps, right? On the clap, make sure I'm on the right instrument there, and have the clap hit on every quarter note of boom, 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 boom of that build-up section. And maybe do the same thing with the kick drum. Maybe make it a little bit more exciting in that second bar so that we're really, dun, 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 we're really just building it up, right? I'm going to maybe put in even a couple more ghost notes at the end, right? And so on that snare fill, to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to change the pitch on these snares. We're going to go over to the Layers tab. I'm going to grab, you guessed it, Coarse Tuning. And let's just start messing with some of these tunings here. Start bringing some of these up a little bit more. Not all of them, but some of them, so that when it does the big roll here at the end, that it also changes that in pitch and hopefully pushes the intensity a little bit more forward as well. All right, cool. And then this is our breakdown build up. I'm going to go back to our timeline mode, and I'm going to delete that last pattern of the breakdown, and I'm going to insert instead the breakdown build up. So just like that, boom, we've got ourselves an extra little element there. Before I save, I'm going to make sure that everything's playing okay. I'm going to go back into timeline enabled mode. And now when it gets to the very end here, we're going to get a much bigger build up into the next section. Hey, what's happening, Grant? Thanks for tuning in. Okay, so at the end of this section, we're going to get that much larger build up back into it now. Right? Just to help push that forward momentum. So just like that, we're creating a song using only patterning 3 inside of AUM. We've got change ups, we've got breakdowns, and you can get in here and, really make the patterns as intricate and as detailed as you want. You could have 8-bar melodic patterns that are really, evolving. They don't have to be just one measure RB type of patterns. Let's go ahead and save. But what let's do, speaking of, melodic stuff, I just want to show you just how easy it is to keep changing everything up and making all these variations and whatnot. Before we call it today, I'm going to make one more variation on the melodies. Let's go really crazy with it. I'm going to press the plus. I'm on the pattern screen. I'm going to press the plus so we add a brand new pattern, and I'm just going to call this one Go Crazy, right? Done. And what we're going to do, let's see, what should we do here? I'm going to start with the root note, and we're going to make a bunch of chords. Dun dun dun, dun dun dun, kind of thing, and dun dun dun, dun dun dun, kind of thing. And then maybe we'll bring the maybe we'll bring the A sharp in here and there. Maybe we'll bring the C in here and there. Maybe we'll bring the D sharp in here and G sharp in here, and then maybe we'll put a couple of ghost notes in at the end. And what does that sound like? Take the timeline disabled so we can just hear this pattern. Cool. All right, so we've got another pattern there called Go Crazy. Let's just save, and then I'll put that in the timeline. Oops, in the timeline rather. And all we need to do is add Go Crazy 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Bring that loop brace out. All right, so do you see what I'm saying? Just how easy this could be to write full tracks? Please let me know that you guys are getting what I'm laying down today. All right, we're going to go back to timeline enabled and make sure that sounds all right. Absolutely, Dale. These are all my... let me just stop right there to address Dale's question. Yes, not only, Dale, can you load your own samples into this, but you can create your own full drum kits. And if you're happy with those and they're sounds that you created and that you didn't steal from a sample pack or something, you can actually upload the kits that you create to the kits cloud of patterning for other users to make music with. And that's exactly what we're working with here today. We're working with kits that I made myself from sounds that I made myself and then loaded into the kit cloud. I have quite a few kits that I've created over the years for patterning 1 and patterning 2 and now for patterning 3. So today we're working with the Drum and Bass Rebellion kit, and we're working with the F minor Saw Plucks Melodics kit. So you can download these kits for free. There are currently 691 free kits that you can browse, preview, and download into your iPad and play around with. We can even have the kits change, so you could have a different drum kit for different patterns of your song. It doesn't even need to be the same kit the whole time, and you can absolutely load your own sounds from the iPad. You can't sample directly into the app, but you can record your samples elsewhere or import those from like Dropbox from your desktop into your iPad and then load any kind of samples you want. They don't even have to be drum samples. That's why I really wanted to do this today, to show what you can do by loading melodic samples. With this melodics kit, I just recorded in Ableton 8 different notes that are all in the key of F minor. Let's just make another pattern really fast before we stop, and let's just make it the actual 8 notes in the scale that repeat twice. I'm just going to go add another pattern, and we're going to call this one scale mode, right? I labeled that wrong, spelled that wrong rather. Okay, so we're just going to call this scale mode, and I'm just going to put the F on the downbeat, the G sharp on the next one, the A sharp on the next one. Just want to show you guys just how fast this is once you've got your kit's set up. Boom. So there we go. We've created another melodic part here. I'm going to go over to our timeline, and we're going to insert that in 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to make sure that our loop brace is properly set from the beginning to the end. So now, just like that, we've got a 48 bar melodic pattern. So this is going to be constantly changing, and it's going to play through each of these for 8 bars before it goes back to the beginning where it loops around again. I need to adjust that end one more time. Boom, just like that. We'll make sure timeline mode is enabled. And we'll save at this time as well. Drums are changing, the crash cymbal and the noise crash are alternating. Got our breakdown drums that we made here. They're going to go into that larger fill. And those melodics just keep changing, right? Many different variations as we could make, every 8 bars, just keep it going. Now delay will be the scale mode, where it just plays the scale in 1, 2, 3, and. That's a great question from James here. Is all the effects from patterning 3 only? It absolutely is. You've got a default built-in delay and a default built-in global reverb that we can send any of the sounds we want to. And so what you're hearing is you're hearing the inbuilt reverb and delay on the saw lead. But if we wanted, but that's one of the beauty parts about the fact that this is now an AUV3, is we could very easily just go into that. We could load up our saw pluck lead version of patterning. We could go over to the mixer tab, and here we have the reverb and delay settings for each individual sound. I could very easily turn all those down to 0 and add a different AUV3 in the node here and put whatever effects I want just on this lead sound. So we could, if you've got like your preferred reverb, like Black Hole, or the FabFilter Pro R, for example, that we just talked about, or a delay that you really like or something, or maybe you want to add chorus to these, to this type of sound, or more compression or some distortion, or, any number of other effects. You can absolutely just turn these sends off and then add your own sends, your own effects on that one channel. You could add compression to just the drums, for example. Any number of, that's what I really was excited to do this stream and show just what you can do using, cleverly put together melodic samples as well. All right, so yeah, the built-in effects are not half bad, right, James? Yeah, I really just, we're just using the built-in reverb and the built-in delay, and the sound on that, is just that really basic saw pluck lead, so it goes with just about anything. It doesn't really have its own personality, so you can use it in a ton of different genres, from down to, and this is free. If you have the app, you can just go to the Cloud Kits, just type in Electronisounds, and you'll find all these kits that I've made over the years for patterning, including this melodic kit that we're working with today, and the drum and bass rebellion kit that we're using as the drums and the bass line today. So we've been going about 2 hours and 15 minutes. I could easily, this is what I do. I'm a total synth nerd, and I could easily sit here for another 2 hours and just keep programming and stuff. But some people see the length on these live streams, and they're like, I'm not watching a 3-hour live stream, as they're running the other way. So I am going to try to wrap it up here. But if anybody has any other questions, I'm going to play it. Let's let it play out a little bit more. If anybody has any other questions before we do call it today, please ask those in the chat, and I will get to those before we call it today. Dale says, can I send different ones to their own channel to add, say, one effect on the snare through one channel? I don't know if it has individual, thanks, Gas. I don't know if it has individual outputs, actually, because I don't use that in iPad, believe it or not. I keep everything just as like a one channel only. But what I would do if I wanted what I would do if I wanted just one sound to have its own effect is I would just load another version of patterning on another channel. Say if I want a snare to be, I don't know, to have its own effect and not be with the kit, I might just load another channel, load that kit on that channel, and mute everything, or only just program the snare, you know what I mean? But it very well might have multiple outs. I just don't know, because that's not a technique. And I'm silly with it. The reason that I don't use the multi-outs is I think it looks strange, and it kind of throws my brain for a loop when apps get that multi-out, and it's really easy for my brain to just separate the channels, you know what I mean? If I need an extra snare, I'll just load the kit again and just label that channel extra snare, you know what I mean? But that's a great question. I'm sorry I don't have the official answer on that one. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, like on Pure Acid. Yeah, I just don't use that feature, so I'm not sure. because I really want to get this across, because we have a different, number of variations with the drums, the next time this breakdown happens, it'll be playing a different melodic part than it was that time. So now we're just evolving. It does have multi-outs. Well, thanks for the definitive answer, Dale. I really appreciate that. All right. All right. Yeah, see, now when it breaks down, we're getting the different melodic pattern. Let's take a look at what the limiter is doing here. What you want? How we're barely attenuating down here on the bottom right. It's not like squashing it. We're just taking off some of those extreme peak levels and keeping the mix a little bit more glued with this limiter. That's exactly what you want to be looking for. Just that little bit of movement. It's not always moving. It's just every now and again, taking off some of those peaks and keeping your main level a little more consistent. Yes to multi-outs. All right. I appreciate that, Dale. Thanks for tuning in today. We are going to go ahead and wrap it up because it's been about 2 hours and 20 minutes now. And just imagine if you were familiar with this app, you could do this in a lot less than 2 hours and 20 minutes because you're not going to be taking the time to teach as you're sitting here creating, and you could take the time to create longer, more varied, more interesting patterns, more interesting breakdowns, more interesting build-ups. I see a lot of people, complaining about the price of this and, being frustrated that it is so high. But yeah, the App Store, Apple, they do take a big bite out of these sales. You know what I mean? And I know the developer has been working on this for like 2 years to make this as bug-free as possible. I've been playing with this for about 2 weeks now and finding a lot of the last few bugs that I've been really getting in here deep, and pushing it to its limits and helping the developer squash these last few bugs so that it's as bug-free for you guys as possible. I know $30 is a lot to invest in an app, but you can do so much more with it than it just being a basic drum machine. Again, we didn't assign any MIDI controllers. You can assign a MIDI controller to any of the knobs in patterning, so you could be adjusting the filters or the volumes or the panning or the effect level, all that stuff in real time for your live jams. You can get in here and program complete tracks by clever use of melodic one-shots. They don't even have to be like, for example, on the Pluck Melodies kit, I have 8 individual samples, so we don't have to change the length as we change our pitch. They're all the same length. But you can, just like we did with the bass line, you can absolutely get in there and take a one shot that's just one pitch. You don't have to have 8 different pitches to create a melodic part. You just go over to that layers page, click the coarse tuning, and then adjust the coarse tuning. So you can still program melodies with these beats. You can have a separate track for the bass, a separate track for the multi-outs if you want, for these melodic parts. You can do so much more than just use these as a basic drum machine. So I do understand that higher than average price point. I know it sucks, when we're used to paying like, less money for iPad stuff. When you start getting into like $30 or more, it starts to feel like desktop and stuff. But on that point, I'm also an Ableton user, and they're up to what, like Ableton 12 right now, but I'm still on Ableton 11 because there's no such thing as a free upgrade with Ableton either, and it's a lot more than $30. For me to upgrade from Ableton 11 to Ableton 12 is like over $100, and it's been like that for each time. When I wanted to go from Ableton 9 to Ableton 10, it was another big chunk of money, over $100, and when I wanted to go from 10 to 11, it was another big chunk of money, another over $100. So, It's not like the developer is sitting back, counting his, money bags and smoking his cigars and trying to rip us off. That's just how things work. If you spent, just countless hours over a period of years, updating your stuff, you can't give that out for free. I mean, he needs to eat too. There's just no getting around that. So yeah, so what do you get with this? You get the ability to load multiple instances, you get the ability to assign the multiple outs, which we did find out definitively, and you get to choose from over 609, I don't know any other app on the iPad that lets you have that kind of choice for drum kits you can work with. 690, I mean, that's like if you divided that into $30, I know we have access to that in patterning 3, but you can't use it like this. You can't use it as an AUV3 and just keep loading more instances of it and have a separate one for the effects and a separate one for the drums. This is huge. And again, as to be a broken record, that is why I wanted to share this stream with you guys so you can see just how powerful this can be. All right, shut up and stop ranting, Dean. We are going to go ahead and wrap it up for today, and I really appreciate everybody hanging out during the stream. Have I tried chopping breaks with it? That is a great question. I have not. It doesn't have a slice feature, which, boy, that would take it to a whole nother level for me personally, because I love being able to slice up a loop and rearrange that loop. But what it does have, now that I sit here and think about it for a moment, is if we go to the load a sample screen, right? If I just tap to load a sample, one of the things that we get is we can set the start point and the end point for a sample. And if I'm not mistaken, that's just for the volume of that sample. But you could get in here and start adjusting, like chop out, part of that loop and then load the same loop on 8 and then get in here. And I was really hoping we could zoom in there. That would be something for the developer. If we could zoom in here, instead of adjusting the volume on this, because it seems like when I pinch, it's trying to adjust the volume on the sample. But if you're watching, developer, if we could have a way to zoom in on the sample in this page here to where we could really easily set some chop points, then we could absolutely get in here and load that same loop 8 times and just choose what section of the loop we want to play. And how cool would that be? I'm going to go with very cool. All right, Olympia Noise Company, take note of that request because that would be really cool. All right, so until next time, everyone, thank you for watching today. And take care of each other, everyone. All right, I'm going to play us out here. I appreciate you participating in the stream, James. Thanks for asking questions. The stream needs that. Big ups, Big John. Hey, we got Skinny Fat joining at the last minute. All right. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff we went over today. If you want to watch this on the replay, I am going to go through and put some timestamps in to make it maybe a little bit more informational to watch back. Here comes the big build. Joe. Say one more thing, and that's, again, the kits that we worked with today are available free in the cloud kits. Just type in Electronisounds and you can download both of these kits absolutely free, and you can work with them the same way that we worked with these today. Thanks for watching, everyone, and we will see you soon. All right.